everyone, my name's Jen. I'm the HR manager here at Trekk Advisory. Today I'll be running through some different HR functions within your small business that may have been impacted by COVID-19 and try to provide some guidance and some clarity and best practices moving forward for you as a business owner and to aid you in your decision-making processes moving forward. Firstly, I just want to acknowledge that not all small businesses have the luxury of having their own HR manager or department to help them along the way with these particular strategies. So the issues that I'm going to talk about may be a little bit overwhelming for some people, just, the content and the, extent of it all. So please do not hesitate to reach out to any of us here at Trekk Advisory. That is what we're here for, to guide you, to provide advice, to aid you during these difficult times. So please pick up the phone, shoot us an email, and we'd be happy to help. Now, without further ado, I'll go through these particular issues. You don't want to be looking at my face the whole time, so I'll provide you with some PowerPoint presentations just to sort of talk to, and I'll provide you with those notes for your internal purposes. And obviously, if anything sort of triggers you within the presentation, as I said, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. I'll provide some contact details and things like that at the end of the session, okay? Before we dive into the presentation, I just wanted to get the formalities out of the way and just make clear that this presentation is general in nature and doesn't constitute legal advice. So just making that clear before we dive in. So let's go to our first slide, which just talks to Trekk Advisory and who we are as a firm. Now, we are an energetic bunch of individuals and definitely dedicated to making a difference in people's lives. That's why we wake up in the morning, and that's why we love our jobs, and that's why we come to work, because we want to make a difference. We are a bunch of down-to-earth and committed, passionate people, and we don't just see ourselves as account processors. So we do have a number of individuals within our team that are extremely skilled in other areas, in particular business advisory, HR, marketing, and I'm sure there's a number of other qualifications and, skill set that I haven't mentioned. But just to put that in into your mind, that we're not just your typical bean counters. We do basically see ourselves as advisors of all part of your business. Every part of your business we can help. So that's how we see ourselves, and that's our point of difference in the market. Okay, on to the next slide. Not that I'm overly thrilled about it, but I'll talk about myself. So my name's Jen. As I said at the start, I'm the HR manager here at Trekk Advisory. I work out of the Brisbane office at Newmarket, but we're currently all working from home like many. I have a bachelor's degree in business and majoring in HR, so that's my specialisation. I'm a member of the Australian HR Institute, so regularly obviously doing courses and things like that to make sure that I'm up to date within the industry and what's changing. I am a bookworm. Yes, I do love my books, my fantasies, novels, and I have 2 dogs. They're my fur children, as I refer to them, that I adore. One's name's Wendell and one's name is Chief. So some say Wendell for Queensland. My partner's from Queensland. I'm from New South Wales. Don't hold that against me. So Chief. So we're sort of compromising there on the names. Anyway, that's enough about me. If you want to know more, the full bio is on the website. And don't hesitate to reach out to me, as I said at the start. If anything triggers you in this presentation, my email's right there, jen@trekkbr.com. Okay. Okay, so let's jump into our first item of discussion. So in the redundancy and Standdown piece will go into in more detail when you can make an employee redundant, when you can stand them down, examples of stand down, so what constitutes as a stand down and what doesn't, and then other key factors you need to consider when standing down an employee. Okay, so your question may be, when can you make an employee redundant? So according to Fair Work, a genuine redundancy is when the person's job doesn't need to be done by anyone. So therefore, when considering this option to deal with this crisis, you need to ensure this role will not be required once this pandemic passes. So bear that in mind when you go down this road. That can be a hairy one. So if the redundancy is in fact not genuine and you put the company at risk of an unfair dismissal claim from your former employee who was made redundant. So just be careful of that, because often in times of uncertainty and panic, we find ourselves in a reactive mindset and can jump the gun a little too early without considering all of the options available to us. So there is one sort of protection here in regards to redundancy. So if you are considered a small business in Fair Work's view, which is there is a few different items, but basically in short, if you employ 15 employees or less, you may not have to pay out a redundancy payment. So there's some sort of protection there for a small business who obviously the redundancy can be quite a costly strategy. So bear that in mind too. So the Fair Work Commission has some great resources. So if you were to go down this road and you just wanted to do some calculations on what it may cost the business, or if you wanted to basically understand if the redundancy is genuine, there is some really great resources there on their website. So to help you stay compliant, so there's fact sheets and notice and redundancy calculators, which will step you through, ask you questions, and basically spit out a little formula at the end for you to be able to apply to your circumstances. Okay, let's move into our next topic of conversation. So before this pandemic, the term "I've been stood down from my employment" was extremely rare, but it seems like daily we hear about big corporations like Qantas and Myer standing down their employees in the masses. So it's a massive topic of conversation at the moment. So to get into our slide, so a stand-down clause may already be present in your employment contracts or enterprise agreements, so your enterprise bargaining agreements. So check these thoroughly before proceeding, because there may be particular conditions that you need to meet before introducing a stand-down for any of those employees that come under those contracts. So just bear that in mind. Now, a stand-down clause is not in any modern awards, but the employer does have a statutory right under the Fair Work Act 2009 to stand down an employee without pay when particular conditions are met. So those conditions relate to the following. So there must be a complete stoppage of work. The employees you intend to stand down cannot be usefully employed in any other capacity of that business. So you should be exhausting all avenues before you come to this particular strategy. So looking at other areas in the business that may be understaffed and providing training and giving those people another position within the business. Although I'm sure most employers would consider that before going down this road anyway. And of course, the cause of the stoppage is outside of the employer's control, which obviously a virus pandemic is outside of our control. So those are the conditions that need to be met before implementing a stand down effect for an employee. So the risks associated with unlawfully standing down an employee basically is they could come back and be able to recover those unpaid wages. And just to make clear too that employers can't generally stand down employees simply because there's a downturn in business conditions or because an employee has coronavirus themselves. So just bear those facts in mind as well. Okay, so we'll just move on to some examples of when a stand down can come into effect, an example of when it can't come into effect, just to put everything that I said before into some context. So briefly, you can see the scenarios there. So the first one is when a stand down can come into effect. So Gemma's part-time at a cinema, and due to the chief health officer issuing an enforceable government direction that they're being classified as a non-essential service and must shut down because of coronavirus. Gemma's manager calls her to explain that the cinema is closed for the duration of the government direction, and that cinema's management will need to stand down all employees without pay, as obviously they can't be usefully employed. So that's a perfect example of when employees can be stood down. Just to go into more detail there, Gemma and her colleagues are advised that permanent employees can take any accrued annual leave that as an alternative to being stood down without pay. However, casual employees are not entitled to be paid while the business is closed. So other industries that obviously have been affected by enforceable government shutdowns, hospitality. I know a lot of hospitality restaurants and cafes have utilised the takeaway loophole, if you could call it that, to sort of keep some employees with a job. Then you've got your gym and fitness facilities that have been forced to shut down, beauty therapists, nail salons, tattoo parlours. So they're the type of industries that are being basically closed due to government direction, and that stand down can come into effect there. So the next one is an example of when a stand down can't come into effect. So this one here, so it looks like Kerry's coffee beans to the inner suburbs of Sydney, employs 5 full-time delivery drivers. So due to enforceable government directions, limited cafes to takeaway services, only cafes have reduced demand for coffee. Cafes are the only clients of Kerry's coffee. So, another business has been impacted by coronavirus, hence there's been a downturn in the demand for her product. This means the number of deliveries that Kerry's coffees make each day falls by 40%. Each driver is only completing 6 deliveries per day, which usually would be 10. So Kerry's Coffees decides that it really only needs 3 of the 5 drivers to complete this reduced amount of deliveries, and considers what to do about the remaining 2 drivers. Kerry's Coffees can't stand down 2 of its drivers in these circumstances. This is because while the volume of work has reduced, there hasn't been a complete stoppage of work. So that just talks to the points before. Deliveries are still required to be made, and each of the employees can still be usefully employed. So yeah, just making a point there that you need to be very careful that it is in fact a complete stoppage of work and not just a downturn in business. So there are our examples. Okay, let's move on to our next slide. So other key factors when considering a stand down of employees. So there's no notice applicable for a stand down. It can be effective immediately. So no need to give your employees notice of the stand down, although it would be fantastic if you're in the circumstances to do that, but it's not applicable in these circumstances. So employees are still considered employed whilst being stood down. and full-time staff still are entitled to public holiday pay, and they still accrue leave entitlements. It's also counted towards their length of service in the business, so make note of that as well. So employers should take this into account when completing cash flow forecasting. So make sure you're taking into account those annual leave accruals and long service leave accruals as well when doing if you're trying to forecast throughout this period. When an employee is stood down, they may engage in another industry or be employed elsewhere, but they must have your agreement first to do that. So Standdown can apply to part of the business. I think we spoke to that before, but what that means, for example, you may have own a hotel which has a restaurant, and those employees have been stood down, but you may keep the reception staff on in that hotel. There's also no fixed notice period for a stand down. So what that means is there's no guidelines, I guess, in terms of telling your employees you're going to be stood down for 3 months or 6 months. So there's no fixed notice period. So we just encourage you to keep in constant communication with those employees affected and keep them updated with any developments. Okay, so we'll just move on to our next topic of conversation. Excuse me. So other approaches you can take in a downturn. So what other approaches can you take when your business has a downturn in trade to reduce costs around your employees? So as we spoke about earlier, other options should be considered before redundancy and standing them down, and it's best practice to work together with your employees to find a suitable solution that considers both the needs of the individual and the business. So you may ask your employees to take their annual leave or long service leave entitlements. In some awards, this may be completed at half pay. We'll visit that further down the road in the presentation as an option. So you should have that option mutually agreed between the employer and employee. So place that in writing. That can be done informally over emails, but should be kept on the employee's record. So basically, you can also explore temporary change in the terms and conditions of their employment as an option. So looking at that, temporarily varying hours of employment. So with that comes a prorated reduction in pay, temporarily reducing salary or wages, and taking a period of unpaid leave. So reduction in those hours or salaries should be agreed between the employer and the employee. Any variation to the contract should be confirmed in writing. So you may be able to use the employee in another capacity in the business, in a new role or under a different award, which would constitute a variation to their original contract. So again, this variation should be confirmed in writing and signed off by the employee. So it's pretty clear that any changes like that need to be, formally written down and agreed upon. Okay, let's move on to our next slide. So what have we got? JobKeeper wage subsidy scheme. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I won't so much be talking to the eligibility obligations and the application process of the JobKeeper payment. We will provide some show notes that will provide you a link to the Treasury's website for more information. And we've also just posted a comprehensive blog on the JobKeeper payment in all of those certain elements. So I do encourage you to jump onto our website to get more details there. So on the 9th of April 2020, the Fair Work Act was amended to support the implementation of the JobKeeper wage subsidy scheme. So as you can tell, the Fair Work Commission is trying to catch up with the different legislations that are being passed. And and trying their best to alleviate some pain, I guess, from small businesses in terms of the compliance side of things. So if you qualify for the JobKeeper scheme, the Fair Work Commission's new provisions, in certain circumstances, may I add, employers to make temporary and partial stand-downs, employers to temporarily alter employees' usual duties and locations of work, and employers and employees to agree on altering an employee's days and time of work and use of annual leave as well. So these new provisions enable qualifying employers to direct an employee to work fewer hours or days, including no hours. The directions are called JobKeeper Enabling Stand-Down Directions. This is only applicable if the employee cannot be usefully employed for their normal days or hours due to the impact of COVID-19 on the business. So we've gone straight into unpaid pandemic leave and annual leave taken at half pay. So as of the 8th of April 2020, basically the Fair Work Commission varied 99 of the modern awards. So they're inserted a temporary new schedule into these awards. So these schedules provide employees with 2 weeks of unpaid pandemic leave and the ability to take twice as much annual leave at half their normal pay. That's if the employer agrees. So, for instance, if I have 5 weeks annual leave accrued, I can therefore take 10 weeks annual leave, but obviously at half pay. So that's what that means. So it can be taken if an employee is required to self-isolate, this being medically or government enforced, but cannot be used if an employee is taken care of someone else in their family because they have the virus. So that's constituted as personal carers leave. The employee must give notice to their employer as soon as practically possible, supplying the evidence, medical certificates, etc., to justify their leave is valid. So employees can request to take their annual leave over a longer period at half pay with written approval of the employer, which we spoke about. Okay, so let's move to our next topic of discussion. So policies and procedures during COVID-19. So this is an important one. So the events over the past few weeks has made us all regroup and rethink our internal policies and procedures. This is to not only help protect our business, but also our employees, to ensure we all know what to do in the unlikely event that one of us was to fall ill with the virus. So a question to you, have you implemented a procedure directly related to COVID-19? So this is critical. It's not intended to alarm you or your employees, but just to ensure that everyone's prepared if someone was to be diagnosed. So Queensland Health have some great resources that can assist with the creation of your policies and procedures. If you don't feel comfortable enough preparing that, we're quite happy for you to either prepare one and shoot it through to us to review just to make sure that you haven't missed anything, or we can provide you with a policy in relation to that. Obviously, it's all new and it's not something that everyone thinks of. So secondly, with the majority of us now working from home, do you have a policy in place and a self-assessment checklist to facilitate these changes? So what we're talking to here is basically in Australia, the workplace health and safety laws still apply when employees are working in their home offices. So with the shift to the majority of the workforce now working from home if they can, there is some underlying risk there that employers need to protect themselves from. So what we suggest is to have a comprehensive policy and procedure around working from home, and also basically preparing a self-assessment checklist for your employees to review their setup from home to make sure that it is safe and that they can sign off on that and be kept on record. So Comcare have a great little checklist that you can base your model of your assessment on. It also covers areas of concern like mental health and well-being. So we can provide a link to their example checklist on that. So just bear that in mind. So do your employees use their own electronic devices, and are they safe? So we mean mobiles, laptops, tablets, all that sort of thing that they're doing work on. Are those computers accessible to other members in the family that are working off the same device? Ideally, you would provide a device that is strictly for work for your employees, but we know that not everyone can facilitate that need. So just making sure that all their antiviral software and you have policies around using a device from home, that sort of thing, to make sure that you're covered. So can they access social media, and do you have a social media policy in place? So these are particular risk areas that you need to review and update your internal processes and procedures to make sure that you safeguard your business. So there's some critical ones there, just with the shift that we've seen in the last couple of weeks. As I said, if you're not confident in writing those policies and procedures, we're quite happy to assist you in those areas. Okay, now the next slide is a heavier one that could trigger a few people that are listening. So mental health and well-being during these difficult times. This area of HR is one that I'm especially passionate about. And I feel that a lot of businesses can utilize these difficult times to create a closer bond with their team. I've just provided a little quote up the top that I find some comfort in, and that is, it is only in our darkest hours that we may discover the true strength of the brilliant light within ourselves that can never, ever be dimmed. So putting that into context, we've all had hard and difficult times in our life. We have survived it. No doubt it's been difficult, but we will come out the other side of this and we will be stronger. So I'm not going to lie. Being in small business at the moment is a really tough gig, but it is the path that we've chosen, us here at Trekk Advisory included in that. So those of us that come out the other side, as I said, will be stronger for it. Mental health and well-being during these times is a critical part of your business success. I truly believe that. And anyone who undervalues that statement, no doubt, will have a difficult time surviving. So you as an employer have the responsibility to yourself and your staff to provide a safe and healthy work environment. So that not only includes physical, but also psychological safety of your employees. So unfortunately, we are isolated at the moment, and we're away from our friends and family and colleagues. So that would most likely pick up on the changes in our behaviour even before we do. So I encourage everyone to implement a daily mental health check-in to assess yourself honestly. Now, the Black Dog Institute has some great checklists and ways in order for you to do that. I won't go into that in detail, but we will provide those in the show notes, which you may You may like to distribute those to your team and provide them those resources as well. They will appreciate it. So for you as a business owner, it's imperative that you remain positive and calm during this crisis period. If you haven't already noticed, staff will mimic your behaviour. So to provide some comfort to your tribe I mean team, it's important to keep them in the loop with any changes and keep up communication daily. So communication is key in this sort of environment at the moment. So I've just provided some suggestions on how to do that. So using video conferencing daily to communicate with your team. So just watching body language and any changes in behaviour and just noting that down. Booking one-on-one meetings. Try to do that weekly or fortnightly to check in to see how they're travelling. Doesn't need to be flash, just a few questions to get a gauge on their mental state. Encourage staff to reach out if anything is bothering them or if they need to take a day off to recuperate. Be vulnerable yourself and acknowledge that these are new circumstances for all, and it's okay not to be okay. So encouraging staff to use the time they would to commute to work in the morning to go for a walk with the family, read a book, yoga, meditate. For me, it's sleep in. I love my sleep, so it's time for them. But try and encourage them to take some time for themselves in the extra time that they've got back from working from home. Encourage staff to establish a work routine similar to the office. So, for example, for myself, I will take a morning tea break around 10. Lunch is usually around 12:30, 1 o'clock, and I'll try and knock off at 5 o'clock. Obviously, with the current circumstances, extremely busy and trying to catch up. So sometimes I don't stick to that routine, but it is important to encourage that of your staff. Just so, it's, as they say, routine will set you free. Encourage clear boundaries between work and home life, and that you don't expect them to work outside of their ordinary hours unless warranted. So when I talk about clear boundaries between work and home life, it is extremely difficult for some people to get out of bed and go to the next room and get psyched up for work, and try and not have employees working from their bed. So they have a designated office area or space in their home where they somehow won't get interrupted by other members of the family. I know that's really difficult at the moment. But all of these items can help assist your employees stay happy and engaged. I'd also suggest to provide articles to your employees from credible mental health providers, and we've listed a few there: the Black Dog Institute, Beyond Blue Foundation, Headspace, and Lifeline, just to name a few. But yes, as I said, we're always here for you guys to lean on. So even if you want to reach out to your advisor and just have a chat about your mental state as well, we are always here. Our door, our phone, our emails, we are here to help. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. I think that is it for now, but I just want to thank you for listening. Really appreciate it. As I said, if anything's triggered you during this presentation, please do not hesitate to reach out. We'll probably provide a blog post just on this as well, just for some people that don't want to listen to my voice for, upwards of an hour. So I understand. So you can also enter your email below to receive the show slides in a handy fact sheet format, and head to our website to receive other great complimentary resources such as our business plan for COVID-19 and 2020 tax minimising guides. So if you need any assistance with what we've talked about today, as I mentioned, or anything HR, please reach out to me. I'm here to help, and I wish you all the best of luck with the next couple of months. And just remember, we'll make it through this and we'll be stronger for it. Thank you.